Sure.
Beyond that.
That's Rusty.
Okay.
I think it might have been you, and then I talked to Rusty as
We-
well.
With this many folks here, the number of conversations are virtually endless, and frankly, probably more interesting than many of the ones right here. But at any rate, we'll get going, and appreciate all of you being here. This truly is a committee of the whole by any definition. So I think what we're trying to do here, and we'll start off with John and Judy, but really in a lot of ways this is meant to, in a more complete form in terms of having everybody at the table, in a more succinct form in terms of saving everybody who I know, pretty much everybody here is very busy, and trying to save meeting time, and also to get the information out in a public way early in the process, which gives the departments more time to do their thing, and hopefully gets us a solid finished product earlier, which is good for all departments, perhaps the schools, or anybody because of the way teacher contracts work. So with all that preliminary, I want to kick it off with John and Judy, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Your Honor. What I'd like to do before we get started, all of you should in front of you have 3 documents, and I will be reviewing those, but the first one is the budget document, the budget schedule, a very preliminary fiscal 08 budget projection, and then a listing of various categories and some background on salaries and health insurance and those types of things. First thing I'd like to go over is the budget schedule, primarily for the people at home. Once we have this budget schedule adopted or have a consensus on it tonight, what it will be doing is we'll be posting it on the website, so those people at home will be able to get online and find out when the various meetings will be taking place. As I indicated, I will be highlighting the major items on the budget schedule. Obviously, tonight is the preliminary budget work session with the Committee of the Whole, which the mayor has mentioned, and for those that are at home, that includes the City Council members, the entire school board, the entire Fire Commission, and the entire Police Commission, along with the appropriate staff. Also here tonight is the Finance Department, along with the Human Resource Department, to be a resource for all of us this evening. Moving on, you'll see that the Fire Commission will be the first one. This will be dealing with charter departments. The first charter department to have a public hearing, and that'll be on January 17th, 2007. Moving down, you'll see the next charter department will be the school board on January 30th. That's a Tuesday night. And again, this will be posted on the website. Then on February 8th, the Police Commission will be holding their public hearing on their proposed FY08 budget. And then the school board will have a second public hearing on February 13th, 2007. And then on February 16th, we're asking that all budgets be brought into the Finance Department so we can start compiling them. And one of the reasons that we're asking for this date to be adhered to is early on the City Council, working with the school board, asked that we try to get the budget adopted this year, the fiscal 08 budget adopted by the end of May, and the purpose is for teacher contracts. And I think for the planning purposes for the next school year, the school department and the school board wanted to try to get the budget adopted as soon as possible. So we're asking that all budgets be put in by February 16th. Moving on, the City Council will be holding a public hearing on the capital improvement plan on March 5th. Also, then on March 19th, the City Council will be adopting the CIP. And then the public hearings on the entire budget, the fiscal 08 budget, including police, fire, schools, municipal, operating and non-operating, will take place on Wednesday, April 18th. Then starting on May 1st, we'll be starting our work sessions, and the first work session will be a combined work session with the police department and the fire department. Again, we're trying to compress the schedule. And then the next one will be on May 3rd, Thursday, a work session with the City Council to review the school board budget. And then on May 9th, there will be a work session with the City Council to review the municipal budget. Following that, on May 14th, we will reopen the public hearing on the proposed FY08 budget. And again, this is something that we started a couple years ago, where we have 2 public hearings. We start with the original public hearing. We basically leave that public hearing open, have the work sessions, and then reopen the public hearing for additional public comment. And then the City Council, if need be, has another work session on May 15th to finalize the budget if necessary. And then we hope to have a special meeting on May 22nd. That's May 22nd, a Tuesday night, for City Council adoption of the FY08 budget. It should be noted that all work sessions will begin at 6:30. They'll all be televised, and all public hearings will be at 7 p.m. The second sheet you have, I won't go through, is the capital improvement plan schedule and the fee committee schedule. Does anybody have any questions about the schedule that's before you tonight? Any concerns with any of the dates? So that after tonight, what we'd like to do is to pretty much have this a finalized schedule and move forward with posting it on the website. So if there are any conflicts and you happen to see those tomorrow, please, as soon as you can, let us know. But if you see anything tonight, let us know as well. Any comments? Okay. Moving on to the next sheet. This is the sheet entitled Very Preliminary FY08 Budget, and because it is only November. Let me start off at the top of the page. You'll see assumptions, because I think it's important that we know what our assumptions are when we start talking about these numbers. The first assumption is a 4% COLA adjustment. As you all are aware, in the 15 collective bargaining agreements, there is a provision that gives a pay raise based on the COLA from November to November. That number won't come out till about December 15th. So what we did is we projected 4%. If it's less than that, obviously there'll be savings in the numbers that you'll be seeing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. What we did is in other operating, we used the same 4% number. We used 11.7% increase in the health insurance, and if many of you that have been on the boards or commissions for a number of years know that we set up a stabilization fund a few years ago. And what we do is we look back at our 10-year history, and we actually budget the average over the last 10 years so that we don't have any one year where we'll have a spike or of high or low. We try to keep it stable, and we make up any of those differences through the stabilization fund. And I believe from most of the departments that I've heard from, they're satisfied with the way that's working because it's predictable and stable. It's not a number we like, but it's a number that we can predict, and we don't jump from 23% one year down to maybe 8% the next year, and so on and so forth. So we have worked that in to the equation. When we did all the salary projections, what we did is we used about 30% of the workforce getting step increases. As many of you are aware, you have had retirements over time, I think, in many of the departments, and so when you bring a new person in, you start through that process of step increases, and those have all been collectively bargained. People start at step A or step 1, whatever it's referred to in your contract, and they move through on an annual basis in addition to the COLA adjustment. So you'll see on the first page, you'll see the municipal departments and the areas of the increase that is projected there. You see the police department. Then moving to the next page, you see the fire and school, and then non-operating. Now, the important page that I draw your attention to is the last page on this document. Same assumptions all the way through, but it really gives a snapshot of the entire city. And what I would ask all those individual departments to do is take a look tomorrow at these numbers. Talk to Judy if you see any weaknesses that, from our projections, and let us know about those. Obviously, they'll all come together over the next couple months once we have the actual November to November COLA, and we'll be able to put those numbers in finer tune than they are tonight. But the idea is just to lay out some projections. But looking at the last page, you'll see the combined total budget. And the key item is, if you look at the first section, you'll see total contractual obligations. You'll see that's 83% of the budget, or $50.4 million, which would be about a $3.7 million increase over last year. And the real areas that are driving this increase, obviously salaries. And if, for example, the COLA drops from 4% to 3%, we can anticipate about a $400,000 savings for every 1%. And that's because not only are we looking at salaries, but it rolls through to FICA, rolls through to retirement, rolls through to workers' comp, all the way through it. It's a rollout, so for everything that decreases. You can see that retirement is our biggest challenge this year. Retirement alone is going up almost $700,000, or about 29% over last year. And that is for a variety of reasons, which we've probably been reading about individually with periodicals that have come out or what's been in the newspaper. But that is something that really will, in each department, cause major challenges. Health insurance, again, as I indicated, is going up 11.7%, or about $960,000. And the entire health insurance is about $9.2 million for next year. So those are the major areas that we're seeing our increases, and just those two alone, retirement and health insurance, are our biggest challenges. So again, going down and seeing total contractual obligations, 83% of the entire operating budget, again, $3.7 million increase. Going down to the next area, utilities and other general operating, again, what we did is we put in 4% in those areas for increases. As we fine-tune those may come down. That's about $424,000, or about 17% of the rest of the operating. So total operating is anticipated to go up about $4.1 million, or 6.7%. Now, again, this is a very preliminary estimate, and so the COLA adjustment might be less. We don't expect it to be more. We've been watching it and tracking it, and it looks like it should be less than the 4%. Then you go down and you look at the non-operating. That includes our tax anticipation notes, our debt service, contingency, overlay, county, capital, property and liability, and other general government non-operating. And that total is going up $756,000, or about 5%. The entire total operating and non-operating under the assumptions that we've made on this sheet shows that the total increases is estimated at $4.8 million, or about 6.4% over last year. So it's important to realize that these are preliminary numbers, but I think it's also instructive to understand where our weaknesses are. And as I've indicated, they primarily are in our contractual obligations and our state obligation for the retirement payment that we need to make into the retirement system for our employees. So that takes care of that sheet. Now, does anybody have any questions on any of the information that I've gone over at this point? Yes, Counselor.
Yeah, just one question, John. Under county,
Are you on the last page?
Yeah, last page. Under county, you have no increase estimated at all in their budget, but yet we're hearing news releases and news reports that they are asking a tremendous increase in certain departments on salaries
Right.
there in the county level.
Right, and again, I think it's too early to, typically what happens with county is we have, right, it has not, it's something that really we have no control over. So if it comes in higher, we just actually add that as a section on our tax bill. It really is, and I think for people at home to understand, it's a misnomer. It's not a county tax. It's really a property tax. We get a bill, and we end up having to pay it. So that is something that we didn't feel comfortable. I mean, we could put 4% in it, but it wouldn't really mean anything to us. As we get closer, we may have a better number, but we typically use the last year's number to not overinflate our budget.
John, I was just wondering if the county part of it will change, where we've had such a decrease in revenues, like in the registered deeds and whatnot. Will that increase for us, do you know?
I don't believe so, but we'll watch that.
They're down 22%.
That probably would affect them, so it would probably add an increase to us unless they reduce expenditures.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Yes.
What is TANs?
Tax anticipation notes. The city of Portsmouth is actually bills in arrears on its taxes. 6 months.
So that's the cost of basically borrowing.
Right.
in anticipation of.
For operations, and to be honest with you, we're less and less, less and less utilizing it. And over time, we've been bringing that down, and over time, hopefully we'll eliminate it, but we leave it there in case there's an issue. Because our fund balance is at a level, we use that for cash flow into the first 6 months of the fiscal year to cover our operating expenses.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns at all? Okay. Moving on to the next sheet you have. This, again, is just a worksheet that we've provided you just as for each department to go back and utilize. Again, we just wanted to show some of the historical issues here. Salaries using the November to November index for the CPI, Boston base, over the last 8 years. We've averaged about 3.2% increase each year. This year, like I said, we're using an estimate of 4%. Hopefully that'll be less than that. You can see the totals of salaries, retirement, health insurance, leave of termination, and benefits. Again, that shows, again, it's $65.1 million for next year. Looking at health insurance, again, the history over the last 10 years, how we arrived at the 11.7%. And then we actually show you the actual health insurance costs, and then we show you the budgeted costs for 08. And then moving to the next page, we show you the retirement. And the Group 1 employees, right now, we're paying 6.81% of payroll. That's going to 8.74% of payroll. Teachers are going from 3.7% of payroll to 5.8% of payroll. That is a major, major, major hit. Group 2, police, is going from 9.68% of payroll to 11.84% of payroll, and that's not just for base pay, that's for overtime, that's for anything that has to do with wages. Fire is going from 14.36% of payroll to 15.92% of payroll. And then you can see below that the actual retirement numbers are going from $2.3 million to approximately $3 million, or about $700,000 increase over last year, or about 29%. That is really our major weakness this year. Is something, and again, that's a cost that's been passed down to us. We had no choice on it. Statutes are the state legislature are the ones that control the retirement system through a retirement board. But again, in order to make any adjustments in any of those benefit levels would take action by the state legislature. The workers' compensation, the only good news, we actually, our experience modification went from 1.03 down to 0.90, which is really, really good. And I want to commend all the departments that have worked with our risk manager, we've instituted some programs, and like anything else, we're starting to see some of the benefits of that. So that's pretty much the sum and substance of the projections. And at this time, I would turn it back to the mayor for discussion and anything that we can answer.
Before I go to hands, because I suspect there may be a few, you can tell, you can tell that really part of the point of the evening is not so much discussion about the numbers. In fact, that's part of the reason for having this format, is the realization during the last budget cycle that by and large the numbers, in this case, the numbers are the numbers. This doesn't discuss new positions. It assumes, for the purpose of this discussion, just to do an apples-to-apples comparison, no new net positions in any department. Obviously, to add net new positions would add to the cost that we're talking about. So we're not talking, it's not even on the policy level that we're talking about here. We're really saying if you didn't do anything different in terms of your composition next year based on the various cost drivers, which by and large are larger than the municipality controls directly, what would happen? And how would that compare to the part that we're not talking about or have not talked about yet, the revenue side? And there really are two drivers to the revenue side. Property taxes, in terms of what we are on the present amount of property value willing to tax that, the rate times the value, And then the second part is new value that might be coming on the rolls. We don't know that, well, we don't know either of them yet, but in terms of new property that would come on the rolls, in other words, growth that would help alleviate pressure from existing property, you can't say for certain, but it's probably fair to say it will not be as large as last year.
No, it won't be.
So it's something I say often that is maybe especially true this year is you cannot grow your way out of budget challenges, certainly not in a short-term way. You can't expect that growth will zap up the difference between, and really I think this will be the lion's share of the discussion on this council. If you try to keep taxes, any tax increase to people's ability to pay, that is roughly inflation plus new growth, and say that's the ballpark where above that you start taking net real dollars out of people's pockets, there will, as you can see from this, there will be inevitably some gap between whatever that number is and the number you see here, which for the purpose of this projection alone was about 6.4%. That assumes a 4% increase, a CPI or COLA increase. If the number is lower, the good news is the 6.4 is lower. The bad news is, though, that the bar also lowers in terms of people who get automatic increases, Social Security and so forth. They also get less than 4%. So it doesn't change the net challenge. It just lowers the numbers overall that we're dealing with. A couple things I want to reiterate, too, that I know John mentioned a few times, and they're really important for the folks at home and all of us around the table to consider. Really, the driver are twofold. Health insurance, that everyone knows that one, but the retirement costs. That, to look at that, I think it was a 29% increase if you look citywide. I mean, that is, it's not the big piece of the pie yet, but it's growing every year as the piece of the pie. That piece is getting bigger, far faster than the pie is growing. So that is, and we're not alone. Every community in the state is dealing with the same challenge. Again, it assumes no net new positions, which is an important part of that's policy discussion that to keep in mind that there will be a gap even with no net new positions, which would imply that it would probably behoove departments to strongly consider not bringing in net new positions, because there will likely be a challenge even without net new positions. Just something to keep in mind going forward. And the last thing, again, for the folks at home, no surprise that people, by and large, drive budgets, because especially the municipal level, people are what makes things happen. 83% of the budget is people, salaries, and the benefits that go along with it. So you're certainly not going to close any gap between what these fixed costs would lead to without some discussion and what inflation plus new growth would do simply by reducing the number of pens and pencils that departments do. Only 17% of the budget isn't people. So it's not, sometimes you'll hear that as we move forward from the general public. It's mainly people. So with that, those are a few things just to keep in mind that'll probably be thematic as we go forward. And certainly at the end of the evening, one of the things that we'd like to do, we're certainly not in a position, no one of us or even the group at this point, to say, here's a mandate, exactly the number. I think that would be presumptuous at this point. But we do, to the extent that we can, want to give you some general idea so that you have the ability to go back now within your department and have a reasonably good idea about how many dollars are likely to be on the table, so less time is spent on how much money are we going to get, and more time is spent on how do we best spend whatever number of dollars we're going to get, and then work forward from there. So with that spiel, I know I saw a few hands. We'll start down here and work forward.
For those at home and those who may be here and not know, John, would you explain on page 2 of the last thing you were talking about, retirement rates, would you explain to the general public why police and fire have such high rates compared to the others? I'd like you to explain it because you could do it properly and tell them why it's that way.
Again, it's all based on actuarial tables. I mean, obviously, because of the retirement benefit that police and firefighters have, and I'm not, speaking to the benefits, it's just a matter of people that now are able to, after 20 years of service, retire at age 45. Obviously, when people come into the system, an actuary will go through and determine, make certain assumptions and determine that, life expectancy and all those things that go along with it. And so when you're able to retire at age 45 and you have a certain life expectancy, the actuary then has to make determinations of how much money has to be set aside to fund those payments for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, so that's primarily, and that's different than the Group 1 employees, which have retirement that is normal retirement is age 60 for Group 1 employees. Group 2 employees, fire and police, have the ability after 20 years to go out at age 45.
Would you also explain to them that maybe these particular funds were not paying attention to this type of a scenario, and that's why last year we had such a large increase, and this year we're hit again?
Well, I can't speak to how the New Hampshire retirement system,
Whether it was operating properly or not, that's all.
I can't speak to that because I don't know all the intricacies of that.
I guess I'd like to get it off the backs of everybody in this room.
It is,
Back to somebody else.
the key to understanding is that it is administered by the New Hampshire Retirement Board. There is a board. It's made up of various members. There's membership from police, fire, teachers. There is no management representative at this time, and I think the legislature, Councilor Pantelakis, we're looking at working with the legislature to try to get a management representative on that board. So that's being looked at. The legislature obviously controls through its ability to create the law and how much the benefits are. So that's the other end of it.
But your larger point is well taken. The problem extends way above what individuals around this table are doing. It's not unique to Portsmouth, and it's not unique to New Hampshire. You go to other states, and the same challenges are happening, and it's not going to get easier unless there are significant changes anytime soon. The cost of individuals, of hiring and retaining individuals, is frankly going up faster than inflation. I mean, that's the bottom line.
I'm right on that point, though. I know there's a line, but I would, in order so all of us and certainly all the people at home understand, to clarify on this point, is it, I guess I'd ask you to verify or otherwise alter my statement here, is the fact that we and every other locality in the state are being assessed a nearly 12 and a nearly 16% increase in our share of funding of the state retirement system this year. That is a reflection of the fact that it has been realized that the obligations, the future obligations of the state pension system for firefighters and policemen have been accruing faster, have been growing faster than the current funding of those obligations. And so essentially we're starting to play catch-up.
Right, and
Underfunding the pension liability, and now we've got to play catch-up. So is this a one-year catch-up? I guess then there's a question that could be asked. Is this a one-year catch-up, or is this something we're going to see, as I think from what I read in the Town and City magazine?
It's probably going to be a long-term unless there are changes in the benefit levels that are provided. I mean, unless there are changes that are made at the legislative level, you have to fund the benefit.
I mean, frankly, one challenge, this is not unlike even Social Security, the national, for somewhat different reasons, but same dynamic in a lot of ways. Just so folks currently in the system or folks at home, for example, one way that's mentioned that would not have much, if any, benefit impact on those currently in the system would be changes that would apply to those that would enter the system starting at a given date. There are, in other states, I think you've seen these sort of things, there are attractive reasons why you could see why people might go there first. You're in the system, there's an expectation that there would be a certain benefit attached to being in the system. To change that, especially if you're well into the system, there's some difficult moral questions, significant, legitimate ones. If it's somebody, and there's a change as you enter the system, somebody new, whether it's fair or unfair, one could argue, but at least you know what you're getting into when you walk into it, just as the person who might be 15 years into the system expected 15 years ago that there would be a certain benefit when they came in the door. So that's not the only way, but I know that's one of the ways that is, none of them are easy. If it was easy, it would have been done already. That's the whole point. Changes in the stock market's return affected it, and surpluses that perhaps there were projections not made correctly, whatever term you want to use, additional benefits were added on without keeping into account perhaps fully that there would be cost to those new additional benefits during the times of plenty. So there are a lot of reasons why it's there, but the bottom line is it is there, and municipalities have to deal with it now. And it's not probably going away anytime soon.
Thank you.
To answer the commissioner's question, he's right. He's trying to take it to tell the people that it's not these particular departments that are causing this raise. It is because of no planning for the future on the retirement board. They kind of got stuck in a stalemate there, and then all of a sudden decided, well, we better start moving up, and it's now coming back to reflect on the cities and towns.
And I'll be working with the local government center along with some of my fellow managers in the state to work on this. Again, it's a combination of working with the state legislature and the retirement board. So it's a combination of those two things. So at this point, until there are changes made at the legislative level, we're required, we're mandated under law.
Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple points of clarification on that. The reason that the Group 2 employees are 20 years and an age 45 is that nobody expected someone coming in as a firefighter or a police officer to do 30 or 40 years on the job, where other groups don't have the same hazards. And as I'm sure the police chief will concur, public safety is a young person's game. As the age goes up, the challenges also increase, and so do the demands on the person. Right. And as anybody that's in investments know, that when the investments go south, so does the funding of the retirement system. So many factors had to do with this, but I want to make sure that the 20-year 45 point was clarified.
Well, and again, it was really just a matter of using, the question was the numbers. And so if you retire at 45 and you live to be 75, an actuarial, that's why the numbers are going up.
Maybe other questions dealing with, again, it doesn't have to be department specific, because even though we just mentioned fire and police, the numbers may be smaller, as you see on the paper, but if you look at the percentage increase, the schools are a good example. It's galloping forward as well. This is not unique to any one department. This is really citywide, statewide, department-wide, you name it. So any other questions or comments dealing with the retirement component? Because it is a very significant driver as to how come somebody at home, it would be a good question, would go, wait a second, you're assuming a 4% COLA increase. How come the bottom line increase isn't 4%? That's one of the main reasons why. That's galloping at a rate much faster than 4%. Questions about this? If not, anything else, obviously fair game. Ken.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think one thing, and I just want to make sure that the public's aware when they get the document like this, is that there's a line, and actually there's two areas that the school department varies differently. Only, I believe, and John...
What are you looking at?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the very preliminary budgets.
Okay.
And it will also reflect over on the retirements to some
Sure.
degree. Is that there's one line, and I guess I also will address this towards Steve Bartlett, is that longevity is rolled up into the school department's salary.
Yep.
Even though when we negotiate, longevity is a single line item on the step increase and contractually on that.
Right.
So when we look at this, there is that one line that's missing, although it is footnoted under the school department that salaries do include longevity. So when we're looking, and I don't know if there's a way, John, to get an average on the salary, because when all is said and done, salaries with your employees will include also those longevities. When a paycheck is written, the longevity portion is there.
Right.
And, I don't think I've ever seen it quite drawn out, or maybe on one sheet of paper where we have a comparison like this, that sticks out. The other one also being that of holiday pay. Teachers and our departments do not have holiday pay, but they do have a salary line item that says, most recently one was the Martin Luther King Day, that we granted that as a day, but it's also rolled into their agreement.
Right.
So when we're, again, I think you put it very well, you're comparing apples to apples. I don't want somebody to think that those are not a portion
Right.
of their pay.
It is.
It is.
By
and it's
federal
just
law,
called out
yeah.
differently.
Yeah, good point.
Okay. Other questions, comments, could be about anything dealing with this?
The other thing I just want to mention, Your Honor, is that we are going to, on the utility end, we're going to go through and do another, like we did last year, we're going to do another analysis that's going to hone in a little closer. We're going to look at the numbers. We have the template in place to drop in the numbers because we put that together last year with the help of the departments. So we'll be dropping those numbers in as we get closer to developing the budget so that we'll have a better and more accurate handle on utilities.
Indeed, it may be fair to say that utilities are, relatively speaking, a bright spot in terms of projecting last year to this year, and that because of some stagnation and increases or actual decreases, the increase, that may actually help in a few cases actually try to drag the number back closer to an overall inflation number. I certainly wouldn't have said that last year. So we'll see, but again, this gives some idea, a pretty good idea, I would think, very early in the process of where these numbers are going to be. Either are they contributing to acceleration past inflation, are they pretty much at inflation, or in a few cases are they actually helping bring it back down to that level? Sorry, Brendan, I saw your hand.
Will that utility analysis include all the school buildings as well?
Yeah, we'll work with Steve on that. We've put together, last year we gathered a lot of information, we've set up a template, so the idea is to be able to drop those numbers in because we do have usage rather than just dollars and cents. So then we'll look at our usage, we'll look at what the costs are in actual dollars, and then extrapolate from that the number and drop that into the budget.
Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to say for myself personally to the members of the boards and commissions that as we go forward and we all deal with retirement, healthcare as being particular drivers of what we're all dealing with, and you in your trades is a bad word, but in your various endeavors, be it education, police, fire, public safety, if you are aware of ways that other communities have addressed these issues that you learn through your professional information that we don't necessarily get, and there are creative approaches to address that, so we're not just staring at a number and wringing our hands about how to deal with it, it would be more than welcome, and we'll try to develop that sort of thing on our own as well. But I'm sure that you have access to information in your various departments that we may not, and so if there are ways that these kinds of things have been addressed to deal with this year in, year out issue that we all have to contend with from a retirement and a healthcare perspective, then it'd certainly be welcome as part of the discussion on my part.
Just to add to the assistant mayor, one of the things that probably over time, and won't go too far into it, but much of what we're dealing with, we're now in this cycle of collective bargaining, so we'll be collectively bargaining a lot of these things, and we'll have to look at those very closely, and I know each department will be, and that's going to be the key to many of these issues, is through the collective bargaining process.
I'll just make another comment on that because collective bargaining is a public endeavor that we all have to deal with, and it's not a taboo. It's part of what you deal with in municipal governance. And, I reach out in that regard to the bargaining units as well to say if there's other ways that these cats have been skinned, while we get into that process, it's certainly something we all want to work on together and see what we can do.
Absolutely. Yep, Harold.
Before we leave, Your Honor, I'd just like to say that we all knew last year this would be a very difficult budgeted year, even more so than last year, and I can see it coming. And I don't think it's necessary, but a neighboring city just passed a resolution. The city council passed a resolution directing the city manager to come in with a level funding budget and a 2% increase budget, exclusive of debt service and operating capital. But I'm not saying we should be doing this, but I was wondering if anybody else is concerned that we should direct our city manager to do this.
Well, I would say, as somebody who sort of had that idea at one point, that in general, I think one of the things that made last year, you learn every year, something that's going to make this year, I think, better. Already, this meeting, I think, is one of the products of education, personal and I think collective as a council, that, you go, I think actually we could probably streamline the process and actually produce a better product and get more people around the table, in this case literally, early in the process. So you're learning, and hopefully there are fruits to that labor. But I would say also, and this is where it's difficult, because you certainly, I take pains to say I'm not speaking on behalf of the entire city council. I have specifically not spoken with other members of the council to try to pigeonhole folks, and I think most folks around the table would agree my style is not to try to pound you into submission in a corner and make you promise something, and then, it's not like that. But if you look at last year's process and where the final product led, it would probably be fair to say that many of the same, at least processes, would be in play in terms of the thought process. You can't, everybody has the right to change their mind in any direction, but certainly thinking about last year, what individual councilors said and did, this is a product of conversation. It's a growth process. Everybody thinks about it, they learn, but you try to use last year's budget process in terms of what was the final product, what were some of the basic tenets that individuals and collectively as a council that we may have subscribed to. Councilor Whitehouse is correct in that it's not like next year's budget will be significantly easier than this year's, or that this year's is significantly easier than last year's. The drivers, at least in the short term, they're not going anywhere. In the next couple of years, retirement is not going to significantly improve from the perspective of municipalities. Healthcare is not going to significantly improve in the next 2-3 years from the municipal perspective. So we know these drivers are still going to be in place. We know that there's going to be sensitivities in terms of tax increases. I think that there was a general consensus that folks that at the beginning of the process that might have disagreed, I mean in the broader community, about what a quote-unquote appropriate tax increase would be, I was pretty pleased at the end of the process that folks at the beginning were saying very different things, passionately. Got relatively close pretty quickly to what they felt like was the neighborhood that people to both the right and left ideologically felt was comfortable. And I would imagine that probably a similar process will happen, and probably the same type of numbers, depending on what the CPI comes in. It'll probably be a similar destination. I say words like probably, I say about, because it's not an exact science at this point. That's why words like very preliminary are on front of the sheet. We don't want to mislead, but certainly want to try to give you some guidance without a firm, here's a resolution that says, here's what it is, certainly at this point. But use past experience as some guideposts to say, here are the kind of expectations in terms of, here's roughly the amount of money that you could probably expect to have as a department, roughly. And then let's work from there. And how you spend it, obviously, at the end of the day is the department's discretion. And we're aware of that. So I use that as a way to say the spirit, but at this point I would say probably not the letter of the law of an actual bang. Here's what it is.
Your Honor, I just threw that out just to get some discussion, that's all.
No, there you go. And it looks like we have a little bit. Let me start back here again. I saw a few hands. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John, on the income side of the budget, for getting a 6% tax increase, if you had to do that, do you expect a percentage increase from sale of buildings, rental income, parking meter income to increase at the same levels?
Nothing that would be as significant, because over 75% of our revenues come from property taxes. So any increase in those other revenue sources would have to be substantial to offset. This year, our tax base is $3.7 billion citywide, which means that every dollar is going to be about $3.7 million. So, there could be some, but I don't see any major revenue source that's going to jump out and say, okay, this is a large number that's going to offset any of the property taxes. So, no to that question.
Second part, Steve, if I may. Going through the process in the last 2 or 3 years, 4 years, you had the JBC, not building, but budget committee, do a tremendous amount of work and meet and discuss and meet and discuss. And at some point near the end of the process, it seems that all that paperwork and all that thought and all that discussion was just kind of thrown over here, and somebody said 4%. It would be a shame for someone to come forward and do that at the end of the process, after the work has been done by John in the finance department, who we work diligently. And John, I'm going to thank you. This is a very interesting piece of paper. You know, for preliminary, it's very good. I would hope that nobody on the council level would come in and propose 2, 3, 4% max. That's it, John. Do it. Vote on it. Let's go. What I'm asking is, be kind enough to let this process work. And whatever the number is going to be at the end, that's what it's going to be. And my chief and the police chief and Dr. Lister are going to have to live with it. Just going to have to live with it. So I would ask that be kind enough to let that happen. Don't let all this work go to waste.
And I think that's a good point. I think that's one reason why trying to set an expectation unusually early in the process, here we are less than a week after Thanksgiving, to say last year, and I stress words like neighborhood, roughly, things like this at this point, it was something along the lines of inflation plus new growth set a very, and by the middle of next month, we're going to know what the inflation number is going to be. And the new growth, certainly, I mean, you've heard indications already this evening, it is not going to be, in very strong likelihood, it will not be as large as last year. It will be somewhat smaller than last year. So it's not going to be a significant, huge number that's going to augment whatever inflation is. Yeah, and that's, I think, something worth mentioning early in the process, so that there's not some false hope that that will be a large revenue source, you know, one time, boom, look at this new base. That's not likely to occur. And letting that information out when we are aware of it is probably helpful to all the departments, so you don't get blindsided by going, oh, shoot, I thought the number was going to be higher. I thought more revenue was going to be reasonably expected. Trying to set those expectations early for the very reason you're saying, so you're not surprised several months from now. Oh, sorry, Laura.
Yeah, I just would like to say that I find in talking to the taxpayers, as long as there's open discussion over what we want and how it has to be applied and whatnot, and in this length of time, that they are willing to have their taxes raised if necessary, so they can have a good school system, good fire department, and good police department. It's when they don't know what's going on that they question a lot more. So I think that if this process that we're starting now, everybody is being involved in it through the TV and whatnot, and that we can all work together and come up with a fairly reasonable, good budget and not too bad of an increase. But we all know that there's going to have to be increases. If you have to increase people, the towns and cities right now that are talking about 2% and right out, they are already putting their teachers, their firefighters, and their police officers on alert that there's going to be layoffs. And that just can't happen in Portsmouth. We need to be able to work it out so that we don't have to do that.
Let me go with Kent and then Ned.
I just want to follow up with Master Gamester there and Laura. This new timeline that you've put in here is very helpful to the school department, as explained earlier on by John. But what it also does is that 85 to 87% of the school budget is that salaries. That a 1% difference when we present that would mean drastic cuts somewhere other than personnel, because we will have then contractually agreed with our contracts prior to that. So again, I applaud that type of frankness in a meeting like this, because it will only help us to make sure that Dr. Lister, with his faculty, can hire and the replacements for retirements and new positions that we may need, and allowing any 1% or even 0.5% is going to be almost $600,000 difference. So that's one thing that I think, again, I applaud that discussion.
Okay, let me go with Ned and then Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to just follow on and voice my agreement with Commissioner Gamester, as well as Councilor Panalakos and Chairman LePage, on the note that, that we're committing, or we're beginning a process here tonight that I certainly hope, and I think everyone around here hopes, and hopefully we can expect in confidence that we will follow this process, and that we won't do it based on kindness, but as Commissioner Gamester said, but I think rather, just to be more explicit, we're making a commitment tonight to each other, all of us around this table, and I think there's a lot of symbolism, important symbolism here, that we're all starting the budget process, every one of us, together around the table, same table. We're committing to each other, and we're committing to taxpayers that we're going to follow a budget process. Just to divert for a second, Commissioner Gamester made a reference to last year's process and how there were, how it went like this, and then at the end there was a feeling that, well, despite all we went through, we can never, one thing I've learned throughout my life in various aspects is, you can never go back and change anything that happened in the past. That's just pretty much a rule of law. It makes a great premise for movies, and that's why it's a kind of attractive, fun thing to surmise that you can go back and change the past and thus change the future. We can never go back and change what happened in the past, but we can always use what we learned in the past to change the future, to act differently in the future. And I think that's what we're doing here tonight. As you mentioned, Mayor, in your opening remarks, you try and learn from the past and then apply it to what you do in the future. And tonight, we're making a commitment to each other, to taxpayers, that we're going to follow a budget building process based on the best available information. That's public information that's shared among all of us and shared with the public, that's acknowledged by all of us, that's agreed upon, that this is valid, accurate information, and we're going to follow a process in which we use that information and open lines of communication to do the best job at building a budget that we can. And so I totally agree with the Commissioner, and I respectfully disagree with even the notion or the suggestion from Council of the White House that we ought to do something arbitrary, like pick a number and say it's 2% or 0% or 3%. I think that's completely counter to what we're doing here tonight. And I, on that note, then want to follow up and just sort of, even from a bigger perspective, acknowledge and applaud, really, Mayor Marchand and the city manager and whoever else might have been involved in the discussions that led to what we're doing here tonight, which is starting this process, with that information, putting out the numbers that, are significant drivers to the budget that we're all a part of building. I think that it's, again, circling back to the symbolism here, important that we, throughout this budget building process, continue to be conscious of the fact that we ultimately are all on the same team. We're elected, all of us here are elected to different positions, but nonetheless elected to serve our fellow citizens. We all have equal responsibility to deliver, the municipal services, education, fire, police, protection, and municipal services that we all want, we expect, at a price that we can afford, as the mayor has said. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a comment to follow on Commissioner Gamester and Chairman LePage, just a thought in this regard. One of the things that would be very helpful, in particular with regard to education, but I think it applies to all departments, is when this happens, and you make the very appropriate comment that 1% might mean a significant issue with regard to personnel, that it would be helpful to me if I could hear unequivocally, if you give us X, we fire this many people, at each percentage in a table that's decided in advance so that we know what it directly, at that point in time, when we're, considering whether we cut $450,000 or not, or whatever we do, exactly what the impact will be, so that we understand in our deliberations what that's going to mean. If we don't understand what the impact is going to be, frankly, it's probably easier to reduce the money. So when we understand that from any department, directly what the impact will be with different percentages to the extent that you can do it, it certainly makes for an informed discussion.
Thank you.
Ken?
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess some of the things that I'm hearing from the citizens of Portsmouth is that when we're getting into the budget process is last year, we pretty much had a philosophy of no new net personnel. And I would like to hear from the departments, if I could, if that philosophy follows forward into the next budget year of no new net personnel and no new net programs. How would that affect where they are at this stage of the game? Because I think that would be a good basis for where this committee can then move on to, is what are you thinking for next year? Personnel is one thing. I mean, the people that we already have and replacing people as they retire, we understand. But what are you thinking for new personnel, new programs?
I'll just defer to, in the school board side, to Dr. Lister.
Well, if I can just, discussing the school board in the schools, I think at this point, Counselor, I would prefer to wait and have a meeting with the school board and be able to discuss some of the recommendations that I have. I think it's kind of premature for me to do that right now. Certainly, we have to take everything into consideration, and as Chairman LePage has said, for each percentage, that impacts all the schools in different ways. And it's up to me to be able to look at how we're going to adapt to that. But I'm not really prepared to do that this evening. I'd rather come back and do that at some other point, but I think I need to meet with the school board first.
And just to let you know, Ken, we have had one budget meeting already, and we have our second one scheduled for Thursday night. We're out every night this week, I forget. We have regular board meeting tomorrow night and a disciplinary hearing, and then Thursday night, is that correct? Bob will have, and it may have some impacts there.
Okay.
And we'll share that once the board has had a chance to review that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Is there anything from the police and fire, if they have?
Oh, sure, yeah, or, yeah, if you may be in the same position as well, but.
Certainly, it's on the, I think there's a difference that the council needs to understand between new positions and positions that have already been approved but haven't been budgeted for a few years. There is an extreme difference there, and I don't know if John wants to touch on that. But for the fire department, we have had 2 people in fire prevention in the budget as far as approved positions from the city council for many, many years. For the last at least 6 years, one of those positions has not been funded. And we tried last year for the fire inspector's position, and we'll go for it again passionately this year. We've talked about fire department staffing as a whole for many years, and we've made strides in that area, certainly not where we want to be. But again, we'll be trying to fund those positions that are approved by the city council.
Thank you. And the police department is pretty much in a similar situation as the school department. At this point, we have not, or the police commission has not had a budget meeting yet. I'm still in the process of accumulating my budgetary data from different departments or divisions or teams within the police department. So it's really too early for me to say at this point. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Your Honor, just probably on or about December 15th, we will send out an updated version of what we gave you tonight to everybody that's here, just so, again, we'll probably drop the word very often, then it'll be a preliminary budget. But at that point, you pretty much are going to be pretty clear if it's a status quo or no new positions, what the numbers are going to be. You're going to be probably within 0.5% either way. depending on, like I said, what comes out of your budget deliberations as a school board, fire commission, or police commission. From my perspective, from the city municipal side, we're going to try to adhere to the no new net, but again, we have to compile the numbers as well.
And certainly where the council comes in, we're talking expenditure by and large here, but obviously where the council's discussions, much of it occurs, the part that gets a lot of attention, is the revenue side. And one of the messages certainly want to send home is, regardless of where individuals may stand, outside of property tax increase, it would be probably misleading to assume that there will be large increases in revenue from non-property tax resources, current property. In other words, lots of new growth that would increase the base and lower the tax impact on existing property owners, business and residential. Sales of property, other unforeseen revenue, one-time revenue sources, that kind of thing. It would be probably not accurate to say that we can expect a lot of non-property tax increase to generate the revenues needed. So that will certainly be a primary part of our discussion as a council going forward. And like I said, I think you know where personally I stand in terms of identifying how much money people can afford to pay, and our goal is to deliver government at that price. But also, that's the kind of discussion we're going to be having as a council. And you know where we were last year, so in trying to give you some measuring stick to say, here's the general neighborhood, and I stress these vague adjectives, that should be some guidepost so that you leave here with some idea as to the kind of discussions that will likely occur on the council over the next several months. And hopefully that helps you in providing some direction as we move forward. So and in that sense, I hope that's helpful, both the drivers on the cost side and some of the potential expectations on the revenue side early in the process. Nancy.
I just want to say thank you to you and the city council for the request that was made by the school board, and I think other departments also, that we do this process earlier so that we can do the contracts on time. I mean, that's really going to be helpful to us. Last year, that was, well, it's been a problem every year, but I just want to thank you. I mean, it really shows that everybody's trying to work well together, and that's what we have to do to be successful. So I want to thank you and John Bohenko and the City Council for letting all of us departments have that opportunity.
Well, certainly it can only help the departments, but the schools in particular, the unique nature of teacher contracts on a year-by-year basis. That's one of the things you observe over a couple of years of being in the process, is that the more you can truncate that period between when a contract goes out and when you can say, not just in theory, although we hope that part of the process starting this early is that far before it is ratified, you will have a very good idea, even well before, I think May 22nd is the date we have here. We'd like you to have a really good idea way before May 22nd what you about are likely to get, because that's only going to help in terms of the policy. It's true for all the departments, but again, the nature of teacher contracts perhaps make it most acute. So that's certainly one of the goals, and we're trying to listen, because it was hard not to notice in the last few years. That's real. And I think, Ned, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Before we, I know we're looking to wrap up. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to follow up on what the assistant mayor said, and to which the school board chair, Mr. LePage, responded. I agree. I agree with the assistant mayor's request, and I understand very clearly, the point that the school chair made, that the assistant mayor was responding to. And I agree with, making things explicit. At the same time,
that's all.
Again, in the interests of early, we're talking about this early, we're having open communication. I hope that, the very preliminary budget figures we're looking at tonight, with the assumptions, very reasonable assumptions about the major drivers, et cetera, we know that we're looking, but something might change a little bit, but already a 6.4% increase in the municipal budget. And the underlying assumption, as was stated, and it's a very reasonable assumption, is that every position that we currently have, we will maintain. And actually, we heard in the case of one department, hopefully we'll fill a position that we've had that hasn't been funded. But the assumption is everybody we're paying now will keep and will continue to pay, and that's a very reasonable assumption. However, it's also a general management principle, not just in municipal governments, but in management and business in general, that year to year, day to day, week to week, hopefully, in all of our work, we're looking for ways to be more efficient, to be more effective, to use resources more effectively, to be able to either do the things that we're doing that are necessary things, to do them with fewer resources, or if there are things that we'd like to do that we're currently not doing, to find the resources to be able to do them. Like I say, in any business budget, household budget, municipal budget. So I hope that the starting point for all of our thinking about our budgets, departmental and as a whole, won't be a reflexive, we assume that we're doing everything we're doing, we need to keep doing, and we assume that we're doing it 100% efficiently. Because that's the assumption. If you say, well, every position we've got, we're going to continue to do, and anything new that we're going to do means a new person. I hope it's clear what I'm getting at. I know you guys, first we got to try to think about ways that we can do anything new within the resources we have. And I will just for myself say that in the future work sessions and budget presentations that we'll have from the individual departments to the City Council, I will be very appreciative of hearing a presentation that addresses that, that speaks to that specifically. Here's the programs we run, here's what we're doing, we've thought about this and that, ways to try to do this with fewer resources. And here's why we can't. Here's why we need 2 more positions in order to do X or Y that we want to do. And then we can have the basis. But I just hope that, I don't want to belabor the point. I hope you see what I'm getting at.
Okay. Well, I think I know there are some things that are not related to budget, some housekeeping, non-related with council members. I don't want to keep other folks sitting around the table unnecessarily. So with that, unless there's something else pressing, very much appreciate everybody coming tonight. It's a lot of people, a lot of coordination, hopefully a lot of benefit as well. And we, myself, and I hope I speak for all the councilors, are available, and people never seem to hesitate to come on up anyway. So feel free to do so, and this is the first step. Thank you guys very much.